The Canadian frontier is vast, beautiful, and unforgiving. In Alberta, where the prairies bleed into the Rockies and small towns cling to the edge of wilderness, ghost stories cling just as tightly. Some speak of restless pioneers who never made it through the long winters. Others whisper of shadows moving through forgotten mining towns, or of voices drifting across the wide prairie when no one is there. Tonight, we'll follow those whispers. We'll enter abandoned hotels, haunted theaters, and lonely back roads where history refuses to stay buried. Alberta's ghosts are waiting, and some are closer than you think. Banff Springs Hotel, Banff, Alberta. Imagine walking down a grand hallway where chandeliers shimmer above you, yet every footstep echoes as if you're the only living soul left. The Banff Springs Hotel, often called the Castle in the Rockies, is one of Canada's most famous haunted landmarks. Built in 1888 to attract wealthy travelers, it has the beauty of a fairy tale castle, but with the sinister weight of all the tragedies that unfolded inside. Guests have spoken of cold drafts rushing through locked rooms, of doors that slam themselves, and of a phantom bride. Legend says she was a young woman whose gown caught fire on a grand staircase. In her panic, she stumbled, fell to her death, and never left. Visitors swear they've seen her, descending the staircase in a white gown, flames licking the hem that never burn away. Others claim she dances alone in the ballroom, a place where music sometimes plays from nowhere. Then there's the bellman, a kindly figure in an old-fashioned uniform who helps lost guests find their way. Only later do they discover no such staff member exists. Staff themselves admit that the ghostly bellman is so well known, they don't bother denying it. The Banff Springs isn't just a hotel, it's a stage where Alberta's past, with all its glories and sorrows, replays endlessly. Would you dare check in, knowing the guest list includes the dead? 9. The Fairmont Palliser Hotel, Calgary, Alberta. Calgary's most luxurious hotel also happens to be one of its most haunted. The Fairmont Palliser, opened in 1914, has long been a symbol of elegance in the city's downtown core, but behind its grand chandeliers and polished marble floors, guests and staff alike have reported unsettling encounters with spirits that refuse to check out. One of the most famous apparitions is a ghostly woman in white, often seen drifting through the hallways late at night. Some say she was a former guest who died tragically within the hotel. Others believe she's tied to Calgary's early oil boom days, her spirit lingering as the city transformed around her. Guests who encounter her describe a sudden chill in the air, followed by the faint rustle of skirts brushing past. Staff cleaning late at night have also reported elevators stopping on empty floors, doors opening into deserted hallways, and lights flickering in once vacant suites. A few even claim that phones ring in rooms that have been disconnected for years. While the Palliser remains one of Calgary's crown jewels, its reputation for ghostly happenings is no secret. Even as guests sip champagne in its ornate lounges, the hotel seems to remind them that history lingers in every corner. Would you dare spend the night, knowing your quietest companion might be a ghost who never left? 8. The Dean House, Calgary, Alberta. In the heart of Calgary sits the Dean House, a striking red building with a past steeped in violence and tragedy. Built in 1906 for Captain Richard Dean of the Northwest Mounted Police, it's seen many transformations: a private residence, boarding house, and now a restaurant. Yet no matter how its walls are painted, they still seem to bleed with memory. Guests often speak of sudden drops in temperature, the strong smell of cigar smoke in rooms where no one smokes, and footsteps that follow too closely behind. But the most disturbing legends trace back to its days as a boarding house. It's said that a man murdered his wife in one of the upstairs rooms before taking his own life. Since then, staff have reported chairs moving on their own, glasses shattering without reason, and disembodied sobbing that drifts through the halls. Some visitors describe the sensation of being watched from the upper windows, only to realize no one is inside. Others insist they've seen shadowy figures on the stairwell, pausing halfway up as if caught between worlds. The Dean House has been restored into a fine dining restaurant, but even amid the clinking of cutlery and the warm glow of candles, many guests feel uneasy, as though the building itself is holding on to a memory it cannot release. Would you sit down to dinner knowing the ghosts at the table may not need a chair? 7. Frank Slide, Crow's Nest Pass, Alberta. The mountains here don't just whisper, they roar. In 1903, Turtle Mountain gave way in one of Canada's worst natural disasters, the Frank Slide. In less than 2 minutes, 90 million tons of limestone thundered down onto the small mining town of Frank, burying over 70 people alive. Entire families were entombed where they slept, their homes reduced to rubble beneath an ocean of stone. Today, the landscape is frozen in time. The rocks remain as they fell jagged, gray, and unmoved for more than a century. But some say the spirits of those trapped still wander here, unable to escape the weight of that night. Drivers passing through at dusk have reported ghostly figures climbing across the rocks, only to vanish when approached. Hikers claim to hear cries for help, carried on the wind, echoing between the boulders. There's a strange stillness at Frank Slide, a silence that feels almost rehearsed. Locals say you can feel it, the heaviness of unfinished stories, pressing down on you as surely as the mountain once did. Some even believe Turtle Mountain itself is cursed, that it waits, watching, until it chooses to move again. If you stand among the stones at night, surrounded by the shattered remnants of lives long buried, you might begin to wonder, are those shadows among the rocks just tricks of moonlight? Or are they survivors still trying to dig their way out? 6. The Princess Theatre, Edmonton, Alberta. Downtown Edmonton hums with life, but step inside the Princess Theatre and you'll feel time slow to a crawl. Opened in 1915, this elegant playhouse has hosted everything from silent films to live performances. But ask the staff, and they'll tell you it also hosts things unseen. The most famous apparition is that of a woman in a long gown who appears near the balcony. Some say she was a heartbroken patron who leapt to her death. Others believe she was connected to the theater's early owners. Whatever her story, witnesses report seeing her glide through the aisles before vanishing into thin air. Projectionists over the decades have spoken of reels starting on their own, as though unseen hands were eager for the show to begin. Cold spots hover in empty seats, and the faint sound of applause sometimes echoes in the auditorium when no performance is on. Visitors describe a strange sensation in the balcony, the feeling that someone is seated just behind you, breathing softly against your neck. When you turn, there's no one there, only the curtain swaying as though touched by invisible fingers. The Princess Theatre is a place where the living gather for art and entertainment. But every show is shared with an audience that never leaves. Would you sit in the dark, knowing a ghost may be waiting for the seat beside you? 5. Fort Calgary, Calgary, Alberta. Fort Calgary was founded in 1875 by the Northwest Mounted Police as a symbol of law, order, and expansion on the western frontier. But the land it occupies carries a much older, heavier weight. It was once an indigenous gathering site, long before the fort's timbers were raised, with layers of history built atop one another. It's no surprise that Fort Calgary is said to be a place where spirits linger. Visitors often describe a sudden, unshakable sense of being watched while walking through its exhibits. Staff have reported hearing boots clomping across the floors late at night, the steady rhythm of patrolmen who no longer serve. Some claim to see figures in red serge uniforms standing at the edges of rooms, staring silently before fading into shadow. But the most unsettling stories are not of soldiers. They're of prisoners. The fort once housed a jail, and echoes of its inmates remain. People have reported hearing chains rattling in the basement, and muffled cries that seem to seep through the walls. A few even say they've seen pale faces peering out from barred windows that should be empty. Fort Calgary is presented today as a museum, a place to learn about the early days of settlement. Yet behind the glass displays and polished floors is a reminder history does not always rest easily, and some who passed through here may still be serving their sentence in silence. Atlas Coal Mine, Drumheller, Alberta. In the Badlands of Drumheller, where the landscape looks more like another planet than prairie, stands the Atlas Coal Mine. From 1911 to 1979, it was one of the busiest mines in the province, fueling Canada's industries. But miners often say, coal is bought with blood, and this place has more than its share of dark stories. Deep underground, accidents were frequent collapses, explosions, and the slow, suffocating death of cave-ins. Many miners never made it back to the surface. Today, the mine is a historical site where visitors can tour the tunnels, but not all who enter come back with only memories. Guides speak of footsteps echoing behind tour groups, even when no one lingers at the back. Lights flicker in the tunnels where there is no power. Voices murmur in the dark, sometimes calling names, sometimes singing the old work songs miners once used to keep rhythm as they shoveled coal. One legend tells of a miner who still roams with a lantern, searching endlessly for a way out. Guests have described a faint glow appearing deep in the tunnels, bobbing like a light in the distance, only to vanish when approached. The Atlas Coal Mine is both a monument to hard work and a mausoleum of sacrifice. When you step into its tunnels, you're not just walking through history, you're walking alongside those who never found their way back into the sun. 3. Calgary Stampede Grounds, Calgary, Alberta. Every summer, the Calgary Stampede bursts with energy, crowds cheering, hooves pounding, music blaring late into the night. But when the lights go out and the fairgrounds fall silent, something else awakens. The Stampede grounds are rumored to be haunted by the ghosts of both performers and animals who met untimely ends in the rodeo ring. Security guards on night shifts often tell of hearing phantom hoofbeats racing across empty arenas, the sharp crack of a whip, and the roar of a crowd that isn't there. Some claim to see shadowy riders galloping through the dirt, vanishing before the gates. Others have described the flicker of carnival lights turning on by themselves, rides creaking into motion in the dead of night. Perhaps the eeriest tale is that of a cowboy who supposedly died in the 1920s during a bronc riding competition. His apparition is said to appear on the track, sitting tall in the saddle before dissolving into dust. Workers have found boot prints that start and stop suddenly, as if the rider himself had materialized for just a moment. By day, the stampede grounds are a place of laughter and celebration. But in the quiet hours, they belong to the echoes of the past. If you linger after the crowd is gone, you may discover the party isn't over. It's just turned spectral. 2. The Old Strathcona District, Edmonton, Alberta. By day, Old Strathcona is a lively neighborhood, coffee shops, boutiques, and a vibrant theater scene. But at night, when the streets grow quiet and the glow of the street lamps stretches long shadows across the brick buildings, something older seems to stir. This district, one of Edmonton's oldest, carries a haunted reputation that locals speak of in hushed tones. Ghost tours here recount countless tales of women seen drifting past the windows of a closed shop, laughter spilling from the upper floors of buildings long abandoned, and cold spots that follow you like a shadow. In the back rooms of pubs and restaurants, staff whisper of glasses sliding off shelves as if shoved by unseen hands. Actors at the Varscona Theatre have sworn to feel presences in the wings, watching, waiting, as though every performance is staged for an audience beyond the living. One of the most infamous tales belongs to the Strathcona Hotel, which has stood since 1891. Patrons claim to have seen figures in the hallways, some dressed in period clothing, others faceless and gray. Footsteps climb the old staircases when no one is there, and locked doors rattle in the dead of night. Walking through Old Strathcona after dark feels like stepping into two worlds at once, the modern city of Edmonton and the ghost town it was built upon. Would you dare linger in its alleys when the laughter fades and the silence takes hold? 1. McKay Avenue School, Edmonton, Alberta. The McKay Avenue School looks ordinary enough from the outside, a handsome brick building, constructed in 1904 that once echoed with the voices of schoolchildren. But its history reaches beyond education. For a time, this was the site of Alberta's very first legislature meetings, where the foundations of the province were shaped, with so much history layered into its walls. Perhaps it was inevitable that something would remain behind. Staff and visitors report cold drafts sweeping through sealed classrooms, doors that slam without warning, and blackboards that seem to write upon themselves. On certain evenings, janitors working late have claimed to hear children laughing in the halls, their footsteps pattering across the wooden floors, though the school has been closed for decades. There's a darker legend, too, a phantom teacher, strict and unyielding, who prowls the corridors. Witnesses describe her as tall, dressed in turn-of-the-century clothing, with a ruler in her hand. Some say she appears beside visitors, her stern gaze fixed on them, before vanishing in the blink of an eye. The McKay Avenue School is a place where knowledge once blossomed, but its lessons have not ended. Even now, the building seems to teach one final truth, that history never really leaves us. It waits, written on the walls, whispered in the silence, etched into the shadows. Alberta may be known for its sweeping prairies and breathtaking mountains, but within its quiet corners and forgotten halls, shadows refuse to rest. From mountain slides that buried whole towns, to theaters where ghosts still take their seats, These stories remind us that the frontier was not only built on courage, but also on tragedy. And sometimes, tragedy doesn't fade, it lingers. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this chilling journey, don't forget to like, comment with your favorite haunted location, and subscribe for more weekly videos from the shadows.